Big Sky Commissioner Wistrcill is back to talk about the NCAA governance and possible expansion of the basketball tournament. Hey, welcome back to the Big Mountain. I am JY. It's great to have you back here with us. This is part 2 of my discussion with Big Sky Commissioner Wistrcill. Of course, part 1, we talked about the Big Sky Conference, its football members, and a lot of other great stuff with membership and realignment. If you missed that, make sure you go and check that out after this episode. But this episode, we're going to get into the proposed changes to the NCAA governance model, as well as some information about the potential change to increasing the number of teams in the NCAA basketball tournament. So without further ado, we'll get right back to it. All right, I am back with the Big Sky Commissioner, Tom Wistrcill. Thank you so much for giving us more of your time, this time to talk about governance and maybe some basketball changes. Thanks for your time again.
Happy to be with you.
Well, let's get into some of the D1 governance changes. Really, to me, the biggest issue at hand right now, everybody wants to talk about CFP, everybody wants to talk about the House settlement, and the House settlement and the governance changes kind of going hand in hand a little bit. We'll talk about that here in a minute. I did hear you speak when you were hired there at the Big Sky not too long ago, and you mentioned that you were fortunate to join a league that wants to be at the forefront nationwide and stand for something. So here we are. We are kind of on the precipice here in terms of where the current college landscape, sports landscape is at. It seems like, some leaders want to take a leadership role. They want to kind of be out there giving guidance, standing for something. Maybe some other ones are sitting back a little bit. They don't want to upset the apple cart too much, if you will. I just want to get your thoughts here to get this guy rolling. What are your thoughts on the role of where things are headed with governance? And also just your overall thoughts on this proposed changes to the NCAA D1 governance model.
Big changes are coming. I think everybody knows that. What's really changed over, let's just call it the last 10 years, is this separation of the P4 away from the rest. Those 4 conferences are so different than the other 28 conferences. What we do in the Big Sky is not that far different than when I was an AD in the MAC. Money-wise, sports sponsorship, media rights, really not that much difference. Quite frankly, not that much difference to the Mountain West in the Big Sky compared to the jump from all the rest of us to those 4 conferences.
Yeah.
So now what you have is you have those 4 conferences kind of splitting as well, where you have the P2, the Big Ten, and the SEC wanting to drive their agenda and their feelings and their thoughts about where college athletics should go. I don't blame them. I know Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, really smart guys, good people, friends, I consider them. We work together. We have discussions. Just our jobs are very, very different. When you're talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars that those conferences can command, they need to do things differently than the rest of us. So those 4 conferences in this new governance plan, most of what they're proposing, I don't have a problem with. They want to have, autonomy decisions about things that are really important to them. Like one of them was thrown at me in a conversation. I don't even remember who told me this. They were like, if we want to have 3 spring football games because we can play another school and generate $1 million in ticket sales, right now they would need our vote to do that.
Right.
Well, I don't really care. If they want to do that, more power to them. We're not going to do that in the Big Sky.
Right.
But if they want to do that, go right ahead. If they want to employ 27 football coaches, right now they would have to legislate that through all of college football. And if they want to do that, go right ahead. I don't care. What I care about are things like championship access that's meaningful to our institutions. I care about the money that flows from the NCAA into the member institutions. And then the last thing I care a lot about is kind of the checks and balance that can keep us together under one tent. I feel like this governance structure goes a little bit too far, especially in that last area. what it would allow them to do if this passes is essentially make all decisions in whatever area they want to change without the membership kind of checking them, you know. So they could say, hey, you know what, Tom? We're giving your AQ in basketball, but your AQ is going to be you're going to play the Big West champion in Las Vegas on Tuesday night every year.
Yeah.
So that's what you get. And then from there you go into the field of 64.
Yeah.
So ultimately they could do that and still say, "Oh no, we gave you your AQ." That's my bad quotes right there. Or we're giving you your units and we're paying you, but now all of a sudden the bracket has completely changed because they want control over those things. That's where I have a problem, and that's where I feel like I got to stick up and fight for what I believe in. Though, so I like I said, I'm a believer, and I think I said this in a Ross Dellinger column last week. You know, I don't know, some ancient philosopher I remember reading said, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm.
So if they can do whatever they want, those two, they can convince the other two to follow along because of the CFP, and then they can convince the G6 to vote along with them because they hold the CFP money over them.
Right.
If they can convince them to do whatever they want, then there's nothing any of us can do about it. And in the current governance model that's being proposed, they just need the four conferences to agree, and then they can do whatever they want. So that's troublesome because, again, there's not one thing that would allow us, the other 300 members of the 360 member body, to get to check their choices. We would be essentially, mute and votes with no power. And so, like I said, most of it doesn't scare me. That part of it scares me quite a bit.
Yeah, and just maybe people don't understand what that proposal is. I'm going to try to summarize it very quickly here. But the proposal right now would give the A4 or the P4, however you want to call them, the more seats at the table comparative to anyone else, and maybe more importantly, the weight of those votes and seats at the table are much greater than anyone else's as well. So I think if the four of those vote together and stay together, as you kind of alluded to here in what you said, they're well over 60%. So they control the governance of pretty much the NCAA, assuming they stick together. Again, put that in a nutshell, more convoluted and detailed than that, but that's kind of the basis. I guess my follow-up, and I think Steve, if he was with me here on this one, he would follow up and say, well, if that's the case, whether it's, say, the P2 or the P4, want to have and will have all of that control, why wouldn't then everyone else just say, fine, go and do your own thing? We don't need you anymore. We're going to, the rest of us, the 100 and I believe it's 130 or whatever it is, conferences are gonna go do our own thing, and we don't need to be controlled by you anymore. Am I oversimplifying that? And if so, why am I oversimplifying that?
Well, it depends on if you're talking about the P4 or FBS. You kind of said both right there. So if you're talking about the P4, that's 60 some schools, right? Then there's 300 of the rest of us. If you're talking FBS, FCS, then that's a different discussion there.
I was talking P4. Let's say
P4.
The P4
okay, so
breaks away.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is right now we're all both part of the NCAA, right? As one big happy family.
Yeah.
The only thing that really binds us together is the basketball tournaments. And that's a very important piece for all of us, right? 97% of the NCAA's revenue comes from the men's basketball championship. So that's a very important piece that keeps us bound together. We couldn't tell them to leave. They would have to want to leave, or we would have to want to leave. And if we want to leave, the other 300, then we're going to have to find a way to fund our own championships because we would be leaving the NCAA.
Right.
Now, so the question then becomes, at some point, are they doing things so different that it's in their best interest to leave? By that, the 60 of them. And then is it just football or is it all sports? We could still have a good basketball tournament with 300, but it wouldn't be near as valuable as it is with those 60 some schools.
Right.
So I think that's what you kind of have to weigh as you think about the future. There's a reason they haven't left. And the reason they haven't left is They have legal protection under the NCAA with 360 schools. They have protection against nonprofit status,
Yep.
again, with 360 schools. And then the legal environment right now, they can have the house settlement and then they can pull us into the house settlement and have us pay for some of it.
Yeah.
So they don't want to leave and take all of their legal issues off the plate just by themselves.
Right.
So that's why it is where it is right now. I don't see it changing until they feel like they have to change. I don't think the 300 of us are leaving the NCAA. I think the only decision at some point would be is, you know what, in order to stop these lawsuits, we have to collectively bargain with the student athletes, and then the P4 could go do that on their own. And someday, I am a believer that they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to find a way to collectively bargain with especially their football student athletes, but their basketball as well. I don't know what you do with swimming and diving and track and
Right.
field and softball. That's above my pay grade, and they'll have to figure that out. But unfortunately, I see that as the only outcome for them with their payment structure and their student athletes. So that's the best my crystal ball can do right now, and it's very cloudy. It's not very clear.
Well, I appreciate that. You answered the question I was asking with a question that I did not articulate very well. So thank you for getting to where I kind of was hoping to get to on that question. Let me ask you one more thing here, kind of with this governance, and then I do want to get to basketball and hear what you have to say about, possible changes there to the tournament. I guess my question is, like, how do the CCA 22 kind of unite? Can they unite? And so if people don't know what I'm talking about, it's all FCS conferences and all conferences that don't have football. How can they unite? And maybe the G6 are involved in that, and maybe they're not. They're kind of that weird middleman, because you mentioned they do have that access to the CFP, and that might be enough of a carrot for them to stay there. But so let's just talk CCA 22 here. How do you feel like you can unite, or do you think maybe things are just happening so fast, you're kind of on your own, and all the other conference commissioners are kind of, I don't say on your own, but you have to speak out on your own, and you just don't have the time to coalesce around a unified front? Can you speak to that just a bit more?
We have a group of the CCA22 commissioners, I think, that has a pretty good plan together, talking about kind of coalescing around a group, 10 or 12 of us, that I think is we have to pick and choose our battles, right?
Sure.
It doesn't do any good for us to tell Sankey and Petiti and Phillips and Yormark, this is a dumb idea. You got to fix it for us. They'll just be
Right.
like, yeah, whatever, Tom. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your input. So it's about, okay, what do we feel is really important to us? And that's kind of like I said before. For us, it's about meaningful access, the money that flows, and then what type of legal protection can we have in here? And because we worry that the house settlement, is costing all of our schools, over time, millions of dollars. And what's the next one? In
Right.
6 months, we're going to have another one, and it's
Absolutely.
another millions of dollars, and I get tired. I use the phrase that it's too bad Weber State's money is going to Zion Williamson and Joe Burrow's pocket.
Yeah.
But that's what happened in the house settlement.
Right.
And so who knows what's next?
Yeah.
So no, I think we've discussed a lot what our options are. We have commissioners meetings coming up in 2 weeks where we'll all be together.
Yeah.
We can have some open and frank discussions about what we're trying to do. I've always found when I get a chance to sit with those four at the P4 level, that we have really good discussion about the future of college athletics. If it plays out in the media, that doesn't go so well. But when we sit down and we try to figure out that it's still in our best interest together to find ways to work together, everybody has to give a little.
Yeah.
And I've found that those guys are very willing partners, good people, and they care about the right things.
Well, that's great to hear. I think, too often we just read the headlines, and that's not really the whole story, or even maybe the story. We're just reading headlines, and and bringing up or coming about conclusions that are just completely wrong. So that's great to hear. There's conversations and how they actually work for people that are in the room where it happens, to quote one of my favorite musicals, Hamilton. So
There you go.
I want to talk about basketball real quick. Appreciate all the time you've given us for these two segments, but you were named to the D1 Men's Basketball Committee here in 2022. So I believe you've been on it here for just a few years. So you have some deep knowledge here of what goes on and how things go on here with D1 basketball. I believe it was about a year ago, and please correct me if my timelines are wrong here, but reports started coming out about possible expansion of the NCAA Basketball Tournament. Currently, obviously, we sit at 68 teams. There were some presentations about adding 4 or 8 teams, depending on which, the way they wanted to go about that. Can you provide an update on maybe where this stands, if an expansion is still kind of being talked about, both for men's and women's, and where things are at there with NCAA basketball?
So yeah, I've been on the committee for 3 years. I have 2 years left in my term.
Okay.
Expansion is something we talk about every meeting. It still comes down to number one, do we want to expand? And if we do, how do you pay for that? And there's two parts of the payment, and most people can understand number one. Number two is where it gets convoluted. So number one is the cost to expand the tournament. My gut tells me if we do expand, it would go to eight,
Okay.
add 8. It would be both men's and women's. So you'd have the cost of essentially like adding another Dayton,
Right.
and so you got to pay for travel and the per diem and hotels and food, and you got to rent the facility, and so there's those costs both for men and women.
Yeah.
Then the real big ticket item is the cost of the units that teams get by participating and winning games in the NCAA tournament. Those are paid out over a 6-year time frame, and so the dollars accelerate really quickly. They get really expensive really fast by adding 8 units and then 16 units, and then and so the challenge is if we're going to expand, is there enough money coming from the media partners or sponsors or whatever to pay for both of those? And the answer to that is we don't know yet. We have our committee meetings coming up in a month, in the second week in July. I would expect and hope that Charlie Baker and Danny Gavitt and the NCAA staff at least have some indications then. Because if we're going to expand this for 26, we need to move pretty quickly to secure a place and get everything set up. So I don't really know where it's going. I mean, my best guess is it's 50-50 right now. And I personally am just one of 12 votes on the committee. And so it's not like I would steer it one way or the other with one vote. I think we're all open to the discussion. We've heard a lot of feedback. Some coaches love it. Some commissioners love it. I've got coaches that don't like it. I know commissioners that don't like it. I know media doesn't like it at times, but I've got a couple media members that think it's an awesome idea. Why not? More basketball, more fun. And so it's always something. If you look at the history of the tournament, it has continually expanded.
Right.
And if you think about the percentage of the teams participating, it's actually the lowest of any championship sponsored by the NCAA as far as percentage of teams that participate. So that's something to keep in mind. College basketball is a wonderful thing. I love the tournament. It's the thing we do best in college athletics.
Yeah.
And so us on the committee feel a huge responsibility to make the decision the right way. If we choose to expand, I can promise everybody it's been well thought out, well discussed over years. If we choose not to do it, that same discussion will have taken place. And so we'll wait and see. But it's the discussion hopefully is going to happen here in the next month or so, and we'll see where it goes from there.
All right, that's a heck of an update for all of our basketball fans and that are interested maybe in where that may be headed. Appreciate all that information and appreciate you taking so much time with us here on the Big Mountain. Thank you so much.
Glad to be with you, and keep up the good work on the Big Mountain.
Thanks a lot. I again want to thank Big Sky Commissioner Wistrcill for joining me on the Big Mountain. Gave us plenty of time, great conversation. We always appreciate when we get commissioners and ADs to join us, the decision makers that can really give us a little bit of information of what's really going on out there in the world of college sports. So again, hey, we thank you guys for watching this. Make sure you like this episode and you subscribe if you like our content. We have a lot of great interviews still ahead here through the summer months as we gear up for football season 2025. Hey, with that, we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.